Yep.
It's
Over
almost
time.
done.
Yep.
Yeah.
Notes here. Oh no, yeah, I'm just gonna I have my notes here somewhere. There we go. Woohoo. That's a very nice library here.
Oh, it is very, yeah. Another Congress.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah, I remember the library I used to go to growing up was a Carnegie library.
Yes.
Was be doing this. I'm very proud to be a farmer. I'm glad I actually grow food that people can eat, like vegetables. I'm not growing corn for an ethanol plant. We can talk more about what we're doing. I do know farmers who grow cotton in Mississippi. They're members of our group, but they know they're not growing food. They're growing cotton, different thing. They get a lot of money to grow cotton, by the way, from the government. A lot of subsidies for that type of stuff. I do not get any subsidies for growing vegetables. Okay, so we can, that's a whole, so just be aware that when we're talking about who's in the food system, farmers, farm workers, this is one of the challenges. Think about that. And have we seen family farmers disappear? You've probably seen these types of graphs, okay? Anyone know how many dairy farms we have left in the state? It's barely 5,000 now. Barely 5,000. It's just above 5,000. When I first came here to UW-Madison at the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, CALS on campus, there were over 16,000 dairy farms in the state. We've lost that many in my 20 years here, 15 years. So I don't know if people can see this very well. I think maybe the cursor, oh, there we go, a little cursor. You can see it. So this is like, can you see those? This is how many, the size of the farms, and this is sort of a timeline. 1850, whoops, sorry, I'm going to go back there. 1850, and then we had some people, who suddenly started getting land after 1850? Immigrants and some people who were finally freed. Right, so we actually had like an increase in farms at one point. And the height of the most farms we ever had was in 1915. I think that says there. 1935. What was going on in the 1930s? Great Depression. Almost half of the farms in the U.S. went bankrupt. You know, the Okies, all that, right? Grapes of wrath. So we started having a huge collapse of farms, right? Huge collapse. And as the farms start collapsing, guess what? Do they get bigger? That's what the bottom part is there. Acres. You see how as the farms start to disappear, they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the ones that are left, right? So now today we have less than 2 million farms, and a lot of them are pretty big, okay? So this is something to remember that, you know, when we talk about farmers, to be honest, we have more prisoners than farmers in the U.S. right now. I find that really sad, personally. In fact, I know some prisoners who were farmers. That's why they're in prison, right? They had to write a check to pay for the electric bill because they had to keep milking their cows. They bounced the check. Next thing they're in prison. Okay. So to be honest, our organization, Family Farm Defenders, which I forgot to mention, we are a national organization based in Wisconsin. We were founded by dairy farmers originally, 1980s, fighting bovine growth hormone, corporate consolidation, corporate control of the dairy markets in Chicago. At that time it was the Green Bay Cheese Exchange. Now it's happening in Chicago, the manipulation of cheddar prices, all that type of stuff. And eventually the group expanded to include other farmers. And then we said, no, we should have farm workers involved in our group. So we have farm workers involved in our group too. On our board, we have farm workers. All sorts of people. We have like 3,000 members all across the country, all 50 states. 500 here in Wisconsin, because we were formed here. But we're a big national group. We're part of other bigger groups. So you can imagine the 1980s, 1970s farm crisis. Some of you maybe remember that. I remember that. Watching my neighbors go under. My neighbor committed suicide as kitchen table as he was losing his dairy farm, 1970s. Tractorcade, farmers driving their tractors all the way to D.C., clogging traffic in Washington, D.C. for weeks. For weeks. What came out of that? Well, people in D.C. were mad. But Farm Aid came out of that. Willie Nelson, Bob Dylan challenged Willie Nelson. People heard the story? We just had the 40th anniversary of Farm Aid. You know, I was in Minneapolis for that back in September. Bob Dylan basically said, Willie Nelson, we need to do something. I'm from Minnesota, so yeah, Bob Dylan, all right. And we've started Farm Aid, right? So the whole movement to try to save farms came out of that. But it's sort of like, do we always have to do something once the catastrophe has started? You know, that's part of the challenge, right? So now we're down to less than 2 million farms. A lot of them are big. And to be honest, it doesn't take much to be a farmer, right? Just have a couple horses. Is Bill Gates a farmer? Yes. He's one of the largest landowners in the United States. He has some horses, I'm sure. So you get the idea. Okay, we're going to have this challenge. Fewer farmers. And why are the farmers going away? Well, this might be part of the problem. How much of your grocery check actually goes to a farmer? Very little. Very, very little. You can see some numbers here probably, right? I mean, retail price, farmers getting a very small amount. Milk, $4.39, farmers are getting $1.80, you get the idea. In farming, in economics, we call this parity, or lack of parity, not a fair price. Farmers are not getting a fair price. They're not able to cover their costs of production and have a living wage. Okay, this is part of the problem. How did this happen? I would argue corporate control of the food markets, people not being aware of how little money. If you really want to give money to a farmer, I'd give you one suggestion. Go to a farmer's market. You're actually giving money straight to the farmer. If you shop at a big box store, I can tell you right now, it's going to leave the state and maybe trickle back a little bit, okay? So this is part of the challenge, okay? And have we always had farm workers? Yes. Okay, I challenge any farmer to say they never have had a farm worker. If nothing else, it's their own children working really hard on the farm, right? I mean, there's this whole theory in economics about how farm families need a lot of kids because that's the labor they're going to have later, right? And all this type of stuff. So, so this just happens to be a picture of a child picking cotton. This is actually not that long ago. I think this picture is from the 1930s or 40s, okay? Can I show you pictures of this from 1980s? Yes. Children literally were taken out of school in the South to continue picking cotton in the 1980s. Okay, so this type of stuff is still going on. My own ancestors were doing this work. A lot of people were doing this work. Is there some injustice in this? I mean, do children have the right to go to school? People know that we did not ban child labor until the 1930s. And we had children in the coal mines. We had children still doing this. I mean, this is a horrible problem in our food system. Exploitation of farm workers, right? And I could extend this to food service workers too. People know that the lowest wages in the entire US economy are in the food sector. We're talking farm workers. We're talking people working in warehouses, people in restaurants. Farmers themselves are often on food stamps because they're living in poverty, a lot of them. I mean, the whole system is like designed for cheap food. Have people heard about this? The wonders of America. Cheap food. Oh, the food is so cheap in the US. As an economist, I go, why? Why is it so cheap? Is it because a bunch of the costs are not reflected in the price? Things like this. I mean, that's not fair food. That's unfair food. Should we be paying more for our food to avoid this type of problem, right? I can tell you people in Europe are not, I mean, they're okay with paying a little bit more for better quality food that doesn't lead to this type of situation, okay? Not that this doesn't happen in Europe too, but other parts of the world, they're not into a cheap food policy, whatever that means. So do we push immigration when we need it? Yes. We've had all sorts of waves of immigration in this country, and some of you obviously came here or are here courtesy of your ancestors being immigrants at different points. Does anyone remember how your ancestors got here as an immigrant? Like, want to share a little bit of that story? Were they recruited? Did they read some newspaper article in Germany about how there's no mosquitoes and it's wonderful land and come on over here, it's going to be great? And I mean, that's what I've seen these newspaper stories. I'm going, oh my gosh, they're like selling you a bill of goods. Oh, they're all here now. Great. Well,
there's a lot of people that came because their country had famine.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who came here because their country had family already here, or they were encouraged to come.
Famine.
Oh, famine, yes. A lot of people came here out of no choice. I can tell you right now, just to give you the Irish potato famine story, if people haven't heard this, it wasn't just because there was a problem with potatoes rotting. Okay, believe it or not, Ireland was not its own country. It was a colonial territory of Britain. You can read whole stories about this. People were forced to grow potatoes. They didn't have many choices. And believe it or not, food was being exported from Ireland in the middle of the famine because the colonial power wanted food. And so people were sent down to the beach to eat seaweed or whatever they could find, and then their only options were to get on the boat. So that was not a natural famine. I would argue it was an orchestrated, cruel famine. We've had many more of those in human history. Did not happen to have to happen. One of the principles of food sovereignty, by the way, we'll have a chance to talk more about that, is food should not be used as a weapon. Food should never be used as a weapon. That is a principle of food sovereignty. Unfortunately, that is not our current government policy. That's certainly not the policy of many other countries. But I totally agree with that food sovereignty principle. Food is too important. It should never be used as a weapon. So there's an example of lack of food sovereignty being used as a weapon. Millions of people die. They're forced to immigrate. So you can see those waves of immigration here, right? Here's a whole wave, back in the day. And then we have a little dip here. Whoops, sorry, we'll go back. And then we have more immigration, right? So we have all these, different, we're basically encouraging people to come here. Either we let them come in, we create conditions where they have no choices. Back in the 1980s, they literally had buses going down to Mexico to bring workers up here. Like they would hire entire buses to bring people up here to work in the meatpacking plants and stuff up in Green Bay and Minneapolis and so on. So it wasn't like they were just finding their way here, okay? But this is just to be aware that we have a lot of history of immigration here. Okay. And then just for the fun of it, I thought, well, where are people in Wisconsin from? You've probably seen these maps, right? You probably know from your own community. Where I grew up in Minnesota, people are still speaking German. It's all these German immigrants. Some of them fought against, they fought in the Prussian-Franco War. They're war veterans buried in the cemetery that came here after the war and settled, right? So, look at, the people are from all over the place here. We got people from Belgium. Gosh, where is that country? We got people from Canada, of course, Czechoslovakia, people from Denmark. I've been to Denmark. We have more people from Denmark outside of Denmark than in Denmark now, right? English, Finnish, German, Icelandic. You know one of the biggest Icelandic livestock collections is up in you go up there and visit this farm. You'll see all the Icelandic, Scandinavian livestock. It's like, whoa, this is great. Irish, of course. You get the idea. Norwegian, Polish, all these people are here. And they came here, right? So they're part of our communities now. Not all of them spoke English when they came here. Were they welcomed? Depends. Was there tension between immigrant communities? Did Catholics like Protestants? Were certain immigrants from certain countries treated differently than immigrants from other countries? Yes, okay. Does your religion matter? Yes, okay. 1950s Bracero program. People familiar with this? Post-World War II. We're going to start bringing in workers from Mexico, millions of them, to work in U.S. agriculture, right? Post-World War II. This is a government program. These people are recruited to come here. Okay, they're coming here. Are some of these people still here? Yep. People know about the poor guy who died up on the factory farm in Kewanee. No, it was in Door County last week. 55-year-old guy from Honduras. He's been working here for 30 years. Skid steer thing fell on him, crushed him to death. He's been here, that's a long time he's been here. His parents probably came to Bracero, I don't know. But he's not a new immigrant. He's been here for a long time working in the dairy farms, okay? So this whole program happens. Whoa, there's a lot of people coming in here. Are these people going to become part of our communities? Yep, okay. People know that there were migrant farm worker marches back in the 1960s in Wisconsin? The founder of Family Farm Defenders, John Kinsman, was involved in these marches. These pictures were taken by David Giffey, who I knew. He just passed away last year. Fantastic photographer. If you ever go to the Greek Orthodox Church in Madison, he's the one who did all the beautiful artwork in the church. He used to live by, I think, Spring Green. He took these pictures. So this is part of our shared history, as rural people, I would argue, as, activists in Wisconsin, right? So this march from Wautoma to Madison was amazing. Do people see some iconography in here? You know what I'm talking about? Is that the Virgin of Guadalupe? Wow. So this is pretty, if you want to know more about this, Salas, what's his first name? He wrote a whole book about this called Obreros Unidos. It's all about the migrant farm worker organizing in the 1960s in Wisconsin. It's really amazing history. I really encourage people to learn more about some of this history. I didn't learn about it until I ran to farmers from Family Farm Defenders who are involved in it. So they told me about this history. So we have that legacy. And then do we have something happen in the 1990s? Some of you vaguely remember this. There's something called the North American Free Trade Agreement is passed. And it opens up the borders, right? So now Mexico is open to U.S. products, right? And Canada, we're going to have one giant free trade zone. And I remember being I was at UW-Madison at the time, and my econ professors were telling me, oh, John, this is going to be great. We're going to have all this cheap stuff. Consumers love cheap stuff. All this cheap stuff's going to be coming in here. It'll be great. It'll be wonderful. And we're all going to specialize in our, we're going to have, U.S. will be exporting all these great things, and we'll be buying cheap stuff from Mexico and so on. Well, one of the problems with NAFTA, there's a lot of problems with NAFTA, is that capital can move really easily. Products can move pretty easily if you don't have tariffs on them. But what cannot move very easily? People. Workers are not going to be moving very easily, right? So you can imagine some of the consequences of this, which we're still dealing with today. This is a border crossing, by the way. Okay, if people don't know what this is a picture of. Today, it's not back in 1994 or something. There's a border crossing, okay? Are we going to have some consequences of this? I remember very well talking to George Naylor, who's a member of Family Farm Defenders in Iowa, and he told me January 1st, 1994, when this deal was signed by President Clinton, January 1st, railroad cars were lined up for miles in Iowa full of corn because they knew January 1st they could export with no restrictions into Mexico. And they were exporting millions of tons of corn into Mexico from Iowa. And he said, yeah, these train cars are just rolling day and night, down to the border, dumping corn. So you imagine some of the consequences of dumping millions of tons of corn into Mexico. Where does corn originally come from? Mexico. Oaxaca, to be specific. Because I've been to Oaxaca. I've seen the actual corn. It's like 12 feet tall. The original corn varieties they have now are like huge. I mean, the little Tío Sente was really small, but now they're huge. So all this corn being dumped in there, what's going to happen to corn farmers in Mexico? Yeah, they're going bankrupt. They're off their land. So no surprise that millions of them are heading north. People predicted this. Like, you're going to do this, destroy their agricultural economy. These people are going to be homeless, landless. They're going to head north. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Millions of people start heading north because they lost their farm, can't farm anymore. They're going to head north, maybe find a job in the maquiladoras on the border, right? Anyone remember the story of what happened to the Janesville auto plant? I teach this to my econ students. We used to make cars in Janesville. Actual cars. Wow, back when we made things. We made cars there. 1994. Anyone want to guess what a Janesville automaker made per hour in 1994? Some people wish they made this much today. Thanks to being part of a union, all that type of stuff. $18.96 an hour. 1994. Starting wage at the Janesville auto plant. Plus benefits, health care, vacation, pensions, all that. And then they were told, no, your plant's moving to Nogales, Mexico. Within 2 years, they're already moving production to Mexico, where they pay people $1.54 per hour. No benefits. Nada. And then the price of cars is going to go down? No. So much for the cheap products from fair trade. The price of the Suburbans went up by $6,000 after they did that. And I was told that workers are the biggest expense in making cars. Not true. It's corporate profit is the biggest expense in making cars, right? So we have this problem. Grain going dumping in Mexico, jobs leaving for Mexico, people coming north, okay? Big issue, people know we just signed a new version of NAFTA, 2.0, you want to call it. Okay, so we're still in this process. This is, I'm sorry, and just, I mean, my friend in Iowa, when these train cars came back, you want to know what was in the train cars? They're coming back empty, sort of empty. There were dead people in the cars. Immigrants trying to come north who froze to death or died of dehydration trapped in these grain cars trying to get across the border, right? So this trade is leading to human issues, right? Human casualties already, okay? We know that. So he said that it was really shocking for some of the people in small town Iowa to have to deal with that. I can't imagine what it's like at Menards when they open up those containers. Well, I know. Some of them know what they find in those containers sometimes, coming from overseas, right? So do people not like this? Yes. Okay, so Oaxaca had a big uprising, 2006, 2007. We had an issue in Chiapas earlier where people were upset about this. We, as a family farm defenders, we went down to Oaxaca during this uprising. I'll say that. We were down there as farmers in solidarity with the farmers in Mexico, saying we thought these policies were wrong. It was good that we were there because our presence there actually helped free some political prisoners. Because, if you want to get out of prison in Mexico, it helps having a bunch of U.S. people there with Senator Feingold making phone calls from one, that will do something, right? We actually got people out of prison, so that made, but, just to get into sort of the solidarity angle of this a little bit. And then we have this whole issue of confined animal feeding operations, or I'll just be honest, I'll call them factory farms, okay? And I can call them factory farms because, believe it or not, the term factory farm came from an economic textbook I read from 1890. Okay, so I didn't make up this term. Economists made up this term over 100 years ago. They were describing taking factory ideas and bringing them onto the farm. I can tell you a big fan of this was Stalin, by the way. Stalin did the exact same thing in Russia. We're going to break up the little family farms. We're going to turn them into giant factories. He did all that too. So this system is not just confined to the United States. You can find this in China. You can find this all over the world now, this model of agriculture. I call it agribusiness, factory farm. So that's a typical factory farm. For those who don't know what a manure lagoon looks like from the air. Are there any cows walking around outside? No. Cows won't see the grass anymore. This is a factory farm. We have about 320 of these in Wisconsin, by the way. Those 5,000 dairy farms I was talking about, some of them are this, okay? These are the ones that are growing really big. Are you going to need a bunch of workers on this farm? Yes, this is not a family operation anymore. In fact, that guy who died, the 50-year-old Honduran guy who died in Door County, that farm has 8,000 cows, if I recall. And they're expanding. So yeah, here we go. So these cows are fed in confinement. There's a bunch of farms like this in Wisconsin. Half the milk in Wisconsin now comes from these giant farms. They need farm workers. And I know some of the farmers who do this. So it's not like I'm saying all farmers who do this are bad people, but they're going to require workers to do this. They can't do this anymore on their own. So where are these workers going to come from? Can't get your kids to do this all the time. They don't have enough kids anymore for this. You're going to have to get some workers, right? So who are these people going to be? So we have these rise of these farms. So you can see like billions of pounds of milk, this is like the type of thing the ag economists always like, here's all the milk, and look at a few farms producing all this milk. Isn't this great? Okay, so that's what's happening. More milk, less farms. Okay. And so we're going to have to bring in immigrants to do this dairy farm work, right? So you can look at the darker, I can just tell you right now, the darker spots are where there's lots of immigrants. Notice. It's not just Milwaukee or Madison. There's a bunch of counties. What that looks like Kewaunee County or way over there. Oh, there's a bunch. What's going on way up over there? Is that a meat packing, a turkey processing plant up in Barron? You can see where these counties are, right? Okay. So this is where a lot of these immigrants are. They're working in agriculture on these farms, okay, or food processing plants. All right. If you go to that turkey plant up in Barron, 30 languages are spoken there. Wow. It's like the whole world in one factory. It's like, whoa, this is like the textile mills back in 1920s where my mom was born. I mean, where she grew up, that era, right? All immigrant workers in these factories. So just a few numbers. I don't want to scare people too much with numbers because I want to save some time for discussion. So we have 2.4 million farm workers in the U.S. now. 1.6 million are full-time. Half of them are undocumented. Half are undocumented. A lot of them have been here for decades. Decades. 8,500 plus dairy farm workers in Wisconsin alone. 70% of them are undocumented. Why would that be? I can tell you right now it's because if you're a dairy farmer, you're milking your cows 24/7, 365. No seasonal workers can do that. You have to have full-time workers. Which is why if you're a dairy farmer in the state, your options for work is really limited. You're pretty much going to have to use undocumented folks because there's no seasonal worker program for you. H-2A will not work for you. We'll talk about H-2A if we want. Oh, there's H-2A. 400,000 H-2A workers in the U.S. These are temporary seasonal workers. They're only here for a short time. And then they have to go home and try to get back in again if they want to come back. All right? This is sort of the modern-day Bracero program. Okay? These are not going to become U.S. citizens. They're only going to be here to work and then go home. Can you imagine being an H-2A worker? Is that pretty insecure? You can be fired at any point, shipped home at any time. Okay, this is a huge debate right now amongst workers. And I know a lot of farmers use H-2A workers for vegetables too. You need to pick a lot of carrots, you bring in 20 H-2A people, you can get all your carrots picked. Okay, so that's one way to do it. But those workers are sort of at your mercy, right? And I know some vegetable farmers that have ICE shown up at their farms. Every H-2A worker has to have their passport with them. If they don't have it, gone. Like that. You're on the bus out. So you basically are on your tenter hooks, the whole, your needles, pins and needles the whole time. Okay? And if you want to see more, I can, one of the amazing things about democracy still, I don't know how long this is going to happen, keep going on, but I can literally pull down the list of all the businesses in Wisconsin that have H-2A workers off a website, which I did. And I can see which farms are using them, which factories have them, okay, which food processing plants are using them. Okay, so this is still a public document, all right? Do you think ICE has this too? Okay. So if you're going to be using H-2A workers, you have to be prepared. And then we have the J-1 workers. Does anyone know what I'm talking about, J-1 visas? J-1 visa workers? These are the people working in the Dells during the summertime at the restaurants. Gosh, that person is so nice at the customer service thing. They have an accent. They must be from somewhere in Europe or something. Those are J-1 visa people probably. They are supposedly came here to learn English. It's a cultural exchange program. And guess what happens to them when they come? They get worked and worked and worked. Some of them literally have to live in these hovels. They're supposedly learning English. But that's a whole other exploitated sector of our ag economy, okay? These people are working in food service, tourism, processing plants, and they're supposedly here as a cultural exchange program to learn English, okay? which I say, well, maybe that's not a good way to represent our country, but welcome as workers. But there's all different types of these short-term visas. There's others. I'm just giving you the major ones, H-2A and J-1, and then we have the undocumented, okay? And if you're talking about immigration. And then this is probably the worst underbelly of our food system, which I just wanted to mention. If your state decides to deport all the immigrants, which has happened in some states pretty much, like Colorado, I can think of a bunch, who is going to be left to pick the vegetables that are rotting in the field? Prisoners. The lowest paid workers in the U.S. food system are prisoners. In some states, you are paid nothing to pick vegetables. Zero. You are forced to pick vegetables. Texas, Louisiana, I can give you those states. Anyone want to know how much prisoners in Wisconsin get paid to milk cows at Wopon? People know we have a dairy farm at Wopon? Okay. Which they wanted to expand, but I heard some politician lived downwind from it, so they stopped the factory farm expansion at Wopon because some politician who's very powerful in the state didn't want to smell it any more than he had to already. You're working on a dairy farm at Wopon, 50 cents to $1.50 an hour. That's what you get paid at Wopon. So at least you get paid something. Arizona, $3 an hour to work on an egg farm. You want to work on a tilapia farm or pick potatoes, bag coffee for Starbucks as a prisoner, you'll be getting paid $1, $2 an hour, okay? So that, I would argue that's also not fair. 30,000 plus inmates are now doing food work in the US, and this is going to only expand if we decide to deport immigrants, right? So just be aware of that. And does this have some bad baggage attached to this? I mean, just look at this picture. Does that look like 19th century something or other? I mean, that's, I just find this type of stuff creepy, to be honest. Oh, yeah. And then, I don't know if people remember this happened 2 years ago, right before Thanksgiving. A Wisconsin company was caught using child labor to clean meatpacking plants all through the Midwest. It's a Wisconsin company, by the way. Contracting 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds to go into these meatpacking plants and clean the equipment because little children are much better for climbing through little pipes than grown-ups, right? Reminds me of the chimney sweeps back in the good old Charles Dickens days. And here's an actual child working at one of the meatpacking plants after hours, of course, because we don't want those inspectors seeing them. They got caught. They paid a token fine of like 70. It was like a joke. But this is a whole nother thing. Like, I mean, we thought child labor was banned. So just, okay, well, we know what's going on in Minnesota, okay? What's happening around the country, okay? And, you know, I'll be honest, my nieces, my sister were in Minneapolis. They've experienced this. My sister, they went through her entire apartment complex, banging on all the doors. She refused to open her door. These people were parked out of my parents' Unitarian Fellowship in St. Cloud, Minnesota, looking for Somali immigrants who live across the street and use the church's community garden during the summer. People my parents know because they are at the community garden, helping them, sharing seeds during the summertime. So this is very, well, if this is 1930s somewhere, this is what I'm thinking of. Oops, okay. So and just to share, as being an economist, I thought, well, you know, maybe people want to know, we'll do a little cost-benefit analysis of the situation, which people are already doing. How much does it cost to do this type of stuff? Is this a good use of our taxpayer money? What are we getting out of it? And for those of you who haven't taken an economics class, the goal of economics is to maximize human happiness, not to make a lot of money. The goal of economics is to maximize human happiness. I would argue that we are not maximizing human happiness with this type of economic policy. 3,000 agents in Minneapolis, $9 million a week for pay, overtime. These guys are getting over $100 a day per diem for incidental expenses. That was more than I was getting paid when I worked at the World Bank, by the way. I did work at the World Bank for a while in a developing country, so I certainly did not need $100 a day. What these guys are spending on $100, well, I can guess what they're spending it on. 3,000 plus people arrested, 1.6 million a week to put them in detention, plus all the flights, I mean, who knows how much they end up costing? A lot. We're talking millions of dollars every week. Are the local police overburdened? Yes. Taxpayers are paying for that, all that overtime. All these businesses shut down for weeks on end in whole parts of the city. Estimated economic loss of over $80 million a week. How long did this go on? 6 weeks? 8 weeks? Did they cancel a whole bunch of major events? My students were complaining, oh, they canceled my snowboard competition in Minneapolis. They're going, you know why? This is why. Are we even going to have a World Cup soccer FIFA thing here? Can anyone even come to the U.S. to watch soccer being played? Are they all on a watch list? How many millions of people are not going to come here because of this? 2 people died. You probably know who they are. Hundreds of people hurt. Lots of damaged vehicles, doors smashed in, all that. Trauma, separation. I mean, that's a lot. That's a heavy toll, heavy price tag, I would argue. Really heavy price tag. Not something I want to have visiting our community. I wouldn't wish this on any community, to be honest. So, as an alternative, yes, could we have a different approach to this? People understand the butterfly motif? Maori Post says butterflies can migrate, hopefully not die from pesticide exposure on the way. But they can hopefully still fly across the border and come back every year, and it's not a big problem. Okay, so I always love it when I see people with their butterfly costumes at these protests. And then do we have examples where farmers and farm workers do stuff together? Yes, I mean, this happened 15 years ago, the big anniversary happening, right? Wisconsin Uprising. Anyone remember the Solidarity cows? I do, because I helped get those cow costumes. I helped bring those 50 tractors to the Capitol that were driving around supporting human rights and workers' rights and Badger Care for All. And I mean, it wasn't just about workers' rights, by the way, right? I mean, people were defending lots of things. Yeah, I'll never forget that one kid who drove his tractor and manure spreader from Bear Valley all the way to the Capitol to drive around with this little manure spreader. It took a long time. He said he left like 3 o'clock in the morning. He's like, good job for you. He's still involved in Family Farm Defenders, by the way. And then do we have allies? I mean, Voces de la Frontera is a great ally. They've been doing this work for decades. I actually know Christine Newman-Ortiz because she and I were students together at UW-Madison before she went off to Milwaukee to found Voces de la Frontera. So they're a great ally. If you need resources, I really encourage you to check out their website. They're actually doing a training this weekend in Madison, a Know Your Rights training at one of the churches, Midvale Lutheran. I think it's on Saturday or Sunday. Might already be full, but if you can get to support them, that's great. And we've been doing this work for a long time. I remember when Christine called me up and said, we're going to have a protest at the Capitol. This is back in 2017. We're going to bring in all these dairy farm workers. They want farmers there to support them. And so we showed up. All these farmers showed up. And we were all together, farmers and farm workers together. Wow, it's like, it was a great event. And I think there's a priest in the background there. I mean, a lot of people were there, okay? So you get the idea. This is not, a wild idea. I thought it was really clever there, gut milk, like the lost person on the, who's going to be milking your cows when we're gone. Very clever signage, right? And then even just last year at the May Day rally. This is last year's May Day rally in Madison, organized by Voces de la Frontera. Guess who was asked to be at the front of the rally? They had our farmer, Joel Greeno, took his tractor down from Kendall to help lead the parade. And he had signs all over it. Farmers and farm workers together. We're all in this together. That tractor is like from the 1930s, by the way. It's like, he knows how to fix it, though. So we're part of the international food sovereignty movement. So if if people aren't familiar with the idea of food sovereignty, I do have some handouts back there you can look at, but it's basically the idea about food. Well, I already mentioned some of the principles of food sovereignty, but everybody has the right to food. Food should not be a weapon. Farmers have the right to have a decent, dignified living growing food. People should not be exploited in the food system. All those ideas. Consumers have the right to know about food, where it comes from, what's in it, all those things. So it's just one example of that. There's lots more. And then we have other allies. Well, there's Via Campesina. We're part of Via Campesina internationally, which is the biggest farm worker group in the world. We have members in Alianza Nacional de Campesinas, which is a national immigrant group. We have other groups like we do. I'm a member of Farmers Union too, so if you need resources, Farmers Union has resources on their website. You can go there. Network for Peace and Justice, we mentioned already, has a whole immigrant section on their webpage where you can get support there. Wisdom is another really, are people familiar with Wisdom? It's more of a faith-based statewide group. They work on lots of issues, but they have a lot of immigrant work they're doing. So these are all good resources. National Immigrant Law Center, one of their handouts in the back. So you're not alone in terms of resources for all this. Lots of good allies out there. And these are just some of my top things to think about how we build solidarity in these times. And I'll just share, I mean, they love to divide us. That's how they're going to be in control, right? We're going to have rural people not liking urban people. We're going to have farmers not liking farm workers. We're going to have consumers fighting with farmers. We're going to have all these people pitted against each other, and then we can be in charge. Well, if we decide to find common ground with each other, that's not going to happen. And believe it or not, we have a lot more in common with each other than we do with the people trying to divide us. So that's something to be thinking about, right? So attend Know Your Rights trainings. Have anyone been to one of those lately? Some people have. I mean, I've been to probably over a dozen over the years. It's always good. It's sort of like taking CPR classes. You need to sort of refresh your training every once in a while so you don't forget how to do it, okay? So I really encourage people to go to Know Your Rights training if you have time. A lot of them are online, so you don't have to physically go anywhere. You can just watch it online. There'll be people talking about it. But more important than knowing your rights is using them. I don't know how many farmers I've known who have gone to some permaculture workshop, and then they go home and they don't do anything with it. They've never actually implemented what they learned. So you can know all about the Constitution and your rights and everything, but when actually you need to assert them, do you know how to do that? Are you willing to do that? If your muscles aren't being used, they're going to atrophy. So actually using your rights is really important. And I can tell you right now, using your rights is so much better in a group. You can be the one person trying to stand against the tide, but if you have a network, you're going to be much better, much safer, much more effective, which is why I would really encourage people to get involved in like a community network of some sort, whether it's a rapid response thing or some other network you have that you can help each other, okay, because that's going to be much more effective. One of the big challenges, and I know the Sauk County Sheriff just signed one of these. Is that true? Yes, okay. 287G. This is where your county sheriff decides to cooperate with ICE. And I was really disappointed when I heard the Sauk County Sheriff has just signed one. There's like 17 counties in the state now that have signed these agreements. So basically they're being deputized to work with ICE if ICE shows up. I find that really problematic for lots of reasons. Basically, it's going to end up being people in their own community having to deal with local law enforcement on the other side when that should not be the situation, right? Okay. So that's something to try to change. Whether you do that through an election, however you do it, okay? And I've called the Greene County Sheriff multiple times and told him, I'm a farmer, you will not sign a 287G with my name behind it. And he has refused to do it so far, but I think maybe we just need to mount a better pressure campaign, or maybe it's going to be when the election comes, people do write-in, no 287G, no 287G, and no 278G gets thousands of votes, and he's going to go, whoa, people really don't like me anymore because no one's running against me except no 287G. So there's that. And I don't know if people are familiar with SCAPE. That's another program. I can't remember the acronym. But that's where they get paid to detain people. So ICE picks up people and they dump them in the local jails, and then they get paid money to do that. So that's like another way that people get wrapped into this whole mechanism, which is very disturbing too. And we actually exposed that Dane County was taking money through that. We get the sheriff to stop doing it in Dane County. So these are things to be aware of. And I would really encourage people to think about, because one thing we always get run into is like, well, John, we know what you're against, but what are you for? Okay, so be thinking about what are the alternatives. So one of the challenges right now is a lot of people just want to revitalize the Bracero program. We're going to deport all these undocumented folks, and then we're going to have them come back through a Bracero program. Or maybe not those same people, their children or somebody else. So, but now they're going to be just these seasonal throwaway workers that we can just ditch whenever we want, okay? Where we control their passports and all that type of stuff. I would argue that that's not a real solution. That just makes the exploitation worse. Because those people have no rights under our laws. 0 rights, pretty much. So it's going to become a big challenge. I remember being at the World Dairy Expo 2 years ago, and I went to a whole workshop on this. Some of the big dairy farms were all excited about H-2A expansion for dairy farms. And their idea is like, we're going to basically hire 100 workers, and we're going to move them around like chess pieces between farms. I mean, that sounds like lords and peasants from medieval times or something. So I was like, oh, that's scary. So what's a better solution? Pathway, I think we need to figure out a way for citizenship. These people have been here for decades, a lot of them. They're part of our communities. Their children are in our schools. They're coming to our churches. I know a lot of them myself. They're friends of mine. Why can't they be part of our country? I mean, our own ancestors are finally given citizenship after 16 years of indentured servitude, but they were able to become citizens at some point. Why can't we do that for them? So this is something to think about. Don't they deserve labor rights like any other worker? Fair wages like any other worker? People know that they pay a lot of taxes. A study just came out yesterday from the Cato Institute, a conservative think tank, by the way, explaining how much money immigrants contribute to the U.S. economy, including undocumented immigrants. If you're using a fake Social Security number, are you paying payroll taxes that you will never see? Billions of dollars is going to the Social Security Trust Fund right now, which my parents are using, thanks to undocumented immigrants. They're keeping that system afloat, right? So that's something to think about. And then we just need to, I mean, human dignity is not, I want to be proud as a person from the United States. This is not what the Statue of Liberty is about. This is not why people come here. So we really need to just speak up and say, I think the Fourth Amendment is great. By the way, I don't think you should be able to barge into my home without a search warrant and drag people off without arrest while you're arresting them. We need to be standing up for basic human rights and the Constitution and the United Nations maybe and other things, right? So there's a lot of challenges. A habeas corpus, like you have rights if you're arrested. They can't just lock you up and not let you talk to anybody and all that. People heard about the St. Peter, Minnesota sheriff. No, it's the police chief who unarrested somebody in Minnesota. I was like, St. Peter, Minnesota. Great job. So apparently ICE was in St. Peter, Minnesota and grabbed somebody off the street. Someone was just filming them doing her constitutional rights thing. I'm just documenting what you're doing. They threw her in her car and started driving her to the Whipple detention center, torture center in Minneapolis. They're going to let her rot in there for days, who knows, whatever. Somebody who saw it happen called him. He's on the phone. Within an hour, that car had turned around and came back to St. Peter and dropped her off. So who knows what the St. Peter police chief said on the phone to the ICE person on the other end, but whatever it was convincing enough that he was able to undetain somebody who had been unlawfully grabbed and returned to his community. And I would hope that local law enforcement people here would do that too. Don't just be silent witnesses. Like, actually challenge what's going on. You know, like, this is not, you can't be doing that in our community. Which I know is going to be a little challenging. which is why I wanted to end with this. Maybe we could talk a little bit about this. The story of Joshua Glover. So I don't know if people know this story. It's about the Underground Railroad in Wisconsin, 1850s. Are people fleeing to the north to escape slavery? Yes, hundreds of them. They're moving into Wisconsin. We had whole black settler communities all through the Driftless of people who fled slavery and started farming here. You can go and read all about this if you want. Joshua Glover's living in Racine. He's been working at a lumber yard or something for years. And then suddenly this guy shows up from Missouri saying he owns him. He's been putting out bounty ads in the newspaper. He has a whole squad of vigilantes with him. They grab him out of his house, beat him up, drag him to Milwaukee, throw him in the county jail. And they're going to take him back to Missouri, put him back into bondage. Are people going to put up with that? 1850s Wisconsin. All these immigrants seeing this happening in their community. No, they say no. Unacceptable. So the Racine sheriff gets a whole bunch of immigrant farmers to march into Milwaukee, part of the abolitionist movement, and break him out of the jail. They always break him out of the jail, and then they have to hide him, right? Because the federal marshals are there. They're going to arrest him, drag him back to Missouri. This is the Fugitive Slave Act times, right? You can't be taking people's property. Got to return the property. They hide him on farms all over this area for like 2 weeks till they can finally get him on a boat up to Canada to freedom, and he finally escapes. So, I mean, that's part of our history here in Wisconsin. I think that's an amazing story of how the state stood up. And guess what came out of that? Wisconsin State Supreme Court defies the Fugitive Slave Act. We will not support this law at the federal level anymore. And other states go, whoa, okay, yeah, we need to stand up for this. Slavery needs to be abolished, period. No more of this. And that like set the whole stage, I would argue, for a lot of what's going to eventually lead to Civil War and all that, all that. But some state had to stand up first, and Wisconsin was one of those states that did that, 1854, when all this happened. And they have a whole mural about this in Milwaukee and other places now, but this history is something we should be proud of, celebrate. It also shows the power of people standing up for justice. And were some people put in jail because of this? Yes. It's a felony to defy the Fugitive Slave Act back then. A bunch of people spent several years in prison for this, but they were willing to sacrifice for the cause. They eventually got out once the law was overthrown. But it's just something to think like, what if you were facing injustice, what would you do? Would you have enough courage to do this? This is difficult decisions. I mean, I keep thinking of people in Europe during the Holocaust. Would you have sheltered someone and helped them escape to Sweden? Would you have done that? It's pretty risky. So this is, I guess I'm not discouraged by this example. I think it shows that sometimes people can rise to the occasion and community can do something to save each other, help each other. Some laws are wrong. Some government policies are not unjust. So I think that might be it. So I will just end there. We have more of a discussion. So hoping that was not too depressing. Hopefully a little inspiring. So we can open up for questions. So thank you for being patient and listening. If you have any questions or thoughts. Oh no. Okay, go ahead. And I'm supposed to repeat the questions as no, that's fine. I know it's like that. You're on the spot.
Well, one of the things that really always amazes me, and well, I'm just going to make a initial comment saying, is corporate America behind all of this?
So the question is about how much is corporate America behind all this? And I would say probably a lot of it, because I mean, if your goal is to make a lot of money. Is child labor one way to do that? Is exploitation of work? Yeah, so maybe there's definitely some reasons there, maybe.
I mentioned the example of car manufacturing with Bill Clinton.
Yep.
It occurred to me at that time, and this always really bothers me. So many people, including our government, all the way down to private citizens, spend so so much time on doing reactive planning
Uh-huh.
rather than pro-planning. And
Yep.
it really upsets me. Oh, well, let's not do anything until something happens.
Yep, yep.
And then we'll put in some stopgap measures.
Yeah, okay, so just to repeat for the audience out there, so the idea is like, well, we've had this problem with like Bill Clinton with NAFTA and others, and part of it is like we're always very reactive, not proactive, so like we sort of do something and then we see there's problems with it and we have to try to this is like a classic software issue, right? They put out some software and there's all these problems with it and we have to like buy the patches and try to fix it and everything, so yeah, I mean, I agree, this is like,
And whatever became of the car manufacturing, the Bill Clinton fiasco?
well, there is no car plant in Janesville anymore, right? So you can go down there and see where it was, or maybe they bulldozed it, I can't remember now. People know they used to make sneakers in lacrosse too. Anyway, so that went to China, I think. But I mean, we just don't, what happened to our manufacturing sector, and is that really a good, we want cheap things, but are we really understanding the price? What's the true price of that? So, yeah. So, hopefully we're getting some cars back, but people heard what happened to the South Korean engineers at the electric vehicle plant in Georgia? I was like, whoa, excuse me, Mr. President. So they literally sent ICE agents into an electric vehicle factory in Georgia that was like huge. It was like one of the biggest ones in the US. All these very qualified, we're talking people with PhDs in engineering from South Korea are helping set up this plant, which to be honest, nobody in the US could do because we don't have any people qualified to do that yet. They're there trying to train people, help them out, and then ICE shows up, loads them up into buses with handcuffs, and starts deporting them. Like, does anyone talking to anybody about the consequences of that? Would we like go to UW Hospital and round up all the immigrant doctors and nurses and put them on a bus in handcuffs and ship them out? What would happen? Disaster, by the way. But there's an example of like, I don't think anyone even thought what they were doing. And did that cause an entire international incident with South Korea? Yes, as if we need to offend any more countries in the world. But like I just find that really embarrassing. Like the fact that we're just going to deport engineers now, like anybody's deportable, I guess. So that I think they realized, a lot of those people ended up coming back, by the way. They've sorted out and they had to put them back on a different plane and came back. But just the fact that happened is just horrible. So yes, you're right do people even think about the consequences? I don't know. Now they're buying up people know this, they're buying up huge abandoned like shopping malls and warehouses to become ICE detention centers. So, are we planning for more of this? Why are we is that like a good use of our tax money? Do we really need a bigger prison industrial complex? No, maybe. So that's a huge thing. But you're right about should we be watching this? Yes. Do we need to like push back against it? Yes.
I'm even before that.
Mm-hmm.
Shame on these people shame on Bill Clinton, number one, because planning.
Mm-hmm.
Planning before something happens. If you can't anticipate, I can't believe this. And Bill Clinton did this, and his cabinet didn't understand maybe some of the consequences.
Yeah. So the question is about do people understand the consequences of what they're doing? A lot of people can give you lots of warning bells, and you still go forward, right? People know how the 2007, 2008 financial crisis happened. A lot of people are making warning signs about subprime mortgages are bad news and da-da-da-da-da. And Alan Greenspan said, nope, I believe in deregulation of financial markets. It's my dogma going forward. And then sure enough, it all collapses. And later he fesses up before Congress like, oh, my theory was wrong. Well, that doesn't, you just destroyed millions of people's lives with a bad theory. Maybe there's more involved in that. So people made a lot of money off of it. Yes, but that was I would argue another totally preventable economic crisis, which happened in the United States. Should never have happened. So, yep, question.
Speaking of bad theories, what's your take shifting gears just a bit on data centers? And, right? And
Yep.
the selling off and
Yep,
have
mhm.
Hatfields and the McCoys kind of
Yep.
attitude of grabbing farmland.
Yep, so the questions about data centers, what's my thoughts about data centers, and the Hatfield McCoys pitting people against each other, grabbing farmland, grabbing water, grabbing electricity, all that type of stuff. So good question. There's actually a whole article I wrote about that in our last newsletter, about why I think I call them AI factory farms, why I think AI factory farms are a horrible idea for rural America, or anywhere for that matter, because it's not just happening in the US, right? Other countries are dealing with this too. But yes, the land grabbing, the water extreme. People know that every time you do an AI data search, it's like 10 times more energy than a normal Google search if you're using the AI enhanced version, which I've turned off on my computer because I don't need it. It's wrong half the time. I mean, I think people just need to stop using it. Because one of the big problems is it's a bubble. They haven't figured out how to make money on it yet. They're trying to figure that out. But I can tell you right now, most people don't want to pay for it because it generates a lot of bad information. And how are you going to make people pay for it? Well, ads and all the other stuff. But a lot of what AI is doing is selling you junk, giving you false news, creating horrible pornography, to be honest, state surveillance. I mean, all that's AI stuff, right? And that's a huge part of the AI industry now. And I would argue we don't need that. Once again, it's not maximizing human happiness in terms of economics. So if we really want to use AI, let's save it for what's really important, like looking for cancer cells. It doesn't need to be selling me stuff with puppy videos on, anyway, you get the idea. So yes, I have lots of opinions about that. Feel free to read my article. I'm really glad that people are finally speaking up and resisting it. Kudos to Charlie Behrens and other people for speaking up.
Selling of farms and farmlands and how they're going, so I agree with
Yep,
everything you just said on the AI itself, but how in your lens, how is it affecting our farm,
Okay.
on the graph of
Yep,
farms
so
going
let's,
away?
yeah, so how is this affecting farmers specifically? Well, okay, so land grabbing is nothing new. That's been going on since settler colonialism. So we've been grabbing land and then privatizing it and using it to make money off of. So the land grabbing right now, a lot of it's happening. Well, to be honest, most farmers do not own their land anymore. Half of farmers are renting their land. So they're basically they're at the mercy of banks or whoever owns their land. Some of the biggest landowners in this country are not farmers. People know this, right? Bill Gates, I can give you a bunch of their names if you want. The biggest landowners in Wisconsin are, well, John Menard is one of them. The Hancock Insurance Company is another one. I'm sure it's just an asset. They're not farming it. You can look them up, okay, besides the state of Wisconsin, which is the biggest ones. But there's a bunch of private people who own a bunch of land in Wisconsin. You can look them all up. The biggest problem with land grabbing is it's usually by people who don't care about farming. So they're going to do something else with it. So if you're TIAA, do people know TIAA? It's the largest pension fund in the world. TIAA-CREF, all state employees. I'm Madison College. My retirement fund, I have no choice, goes to TIAA. They're using my retirement money now to buy up farmland as a hedge, as a speculative investment. And they don't care what the farmland does after that. I mean, they're just going to rent it out to do whatever. They're probably getting more carbon credits than anything from it. Who knows what they're doing with it. But so there's an example of a hedge fund driving up land prices, taking land away from, TIA just bought 20,000 acres in the delta of Mississippi. Who would normally be farming 20,000 acres in the delta of Mississippi? African American farmers who were thrown off their land. This is right across from Fannie Lou Hamer's Freedom Farm. That's what they just bought. In one swoop, 20,000 acres. I can tell you right now, African American farmers are not going to be farming that. They're going to rent that out to a giant sugarcane or rice grower, some corporate friend of theirs. So there's an example of land grabbing. So the AI data centers are a similar thing. 600 acres for AI data center over in Mount Pleasant, I think it is, wherever it is. I mean, that's a lot of land. How much are they paying for that land? I can tell you right now it's more than $7,000 an acre, which is like the average price in Wisconsin right now, 6 to 7. I mean, factory farms will pay $15,000 for land just to dump their manure on. So that's going to drive out other farmers who can't afford that, right? So that's part of the problem too. So our organization totally supports corporate limits on farm and land ownership. They should not be allowed to own all this land. We want more farmers, not less, which is a big debate. I mean, some people would say, oh, I just want the cheapest food possible. If it can all come from a 3D printer, I'll be happy. Well, no, that's not the goal of agriculture. That's a different world. So yes, AI data centers, big problem, because that's just the latest land grab, which is what's happening. So, and it's often the same companies, same hedge funds, they're sort of incestuous. They invest in each other, all that type of stuff. Swap land when they feel like it. So, any other questions or thoughts? And we're not going to get many jobs from this AI data center, just so people know. It doesn't take a lot of money to run a bank of computers. So it's not going to be, it's sort of like, oh, we'll build a prison. We'll create some jobs. Well, those are not great jobs. It doesn't take a lot of, I mean, I think there are a lot of better jobs you could be creating than that type of stuff. If you want a job, yeah.
How about, do you mind, I have one more question?
Sure.
How about the idea of generational farms?
Yep.
And those generations are dying off,
Mm-hmm.
and their kids don't necessarily want anything to do with it.
Yes.
What's going on. So, do you have any ideas on, how can we get other, because there are people who do want to farm.
Sure. Yep. Yep.
That are not part of that generation. So, wondering how you can bridge that.
Oh, sure. Yep. That's a great question. Yeah. So the questions about how do generational farming transitions, how do we, people are leaving farming, their kids are burned out, to be honest. They don't want to inherit the farm. And we have this whole new generation of farmers coming in. How do we, and I'll tell you right now, land access is a huge challenge for any beginning farmer. I mean, it took me years to find a farm, and I'm not a beginning farmer. Well, I've only been farming for 10 years in my current situation, but I grew up on a farm. I could have inherited my farm if I went back to Minnesota, but I'm not there, so my brother's going to deal with that. But yes, how do you get land and people leaving farming? People know that we have the largest land transfers going to be happening in human history, well, U.S. history, in the next 3 to 4 or 5 years. People know this, 400,000 acres. I mean, huge amounts of land is going to be relocating, or 400 million. I think it's 400 million. Acres are going to be shifting hands because the baby boomer generation, my parents, are not going to be here forever. Someone's going to be getting that land. And for a lot of farmers, land is their retirement fund. And so then that becomes a tension. Do I sell? I'll just give you a really sad example of this. There's a big farm in northern Dane County that was all opposed to having a solar operation. For some reason, they like, oh, solar farms, bad use of ag land. They're taking ag land and putting solar panels all over the place. But then when the AI data center came along, they were willing to sell their entire farm to the AI data center. So I guess there was a price point or something there, which finally is like totally changed their mind about farmland being taken out of farming or something. So there's that problem. People obviously need money. They're going to be desperate to get money. How do you help a transition happen? Well, I just got a really nice note last week from an 86-year-old farmer in Arcadia, Wisconsin. He had been farming for 30 years, dairy farmer. He was a teacher before that. He was 20 years a teacher, 30 years as a dairy farmer. Retired. He didn't want his farm to be sold to developers. He was really worried about this. He wrote me this really nice note. I was going, oh my gosh, this is such a great story. 3 times he tried to find someone to buy his farm. Couldn't find anyone, couldn't find anybody. And then he heard about a farm couple in Iowa that wanted to get into dairy farming and were being kicked off their rented land. And he called them up. And they worked it out. And now this young family in their 40s has taken over his farm, and they're selling to Organic Valley. They have 5 kids now. But they must have come to some agreement where they were able to transition that. And obviously, this old couple didn't want the maximum amount of money they could have gotten because they could have sold to John Hancock Insurance Company. And they worked it out. So there are transition programs available like that. If you're really curious about that, I would investigate something like Agrarian Trust, just trying to match up farmers with people going into farming. There are farm beginning programs like Land Stewardship Project in Minnesota has those, where they match up beginning farmers with retiring farmers. But
we don't have any of those in Wisconsin.
we have some things like that, but I would argue we could do more.
Yeah.
We could do a lot more. And part of it is like people need to think about land is not just a commodity. It is, I would argue, part of the commons. We all care about land. I mean, to be honest, whose land was it originally? I mean, it was stolen. We stole it, right? So maybe part of it should be part of reparations, rematriation. People heard about the convent, the nuns up in Superior. Where was it? Ashland? There was some religious group up north that gave back all their land to the Bad River tribe. I can't remember which, it was some Catholic monastery, nunnery or something. So there's an example of a church that was feeling like, oh my gosh, we like had these schools, we were making these people learn English, you know, all that history. And like, we really need to give this land back. And so that's one thing to think about too. I mean, my parents were worried about their farm being destroyed by a natural gas pipeline. Does that sound familiar? Pipeline plowing through the countryside, eminent domain, thanks to the government, get eminent domain, they're going to take your land no matter what you do. They were worried about a natural gas pipeline plowing through their farm. It hadn't come yet, though. My dad calls the Minnesota Land Trust. Hi, Minnesota Land Trust. We want to put this farm in a conservation easement. Get it off the real estate market. No one's going to be able to buy it ever again because we're going to put all these restrictions on it. See what I'm talking about? Natural gas pipeline had to go all the way around their farm because NSP didn't have enough lawyers to fight the land trust. I mean, they could have tried, but that farm now had so much legal power on its side. Oh, there's bald eagle nests here. There's, oh my gosh, all this. Oh my gosh, you don't want to mess with that. We'll just go around. Do you see what the Bad River Reservation's doing with the pipeline? Similar thing. They're going to have to go all the way around it now because they're asserting their rights. You know, so yeah, there's a big need to transition farmland, and I'd hope people would think about that. If you know people are retiring, there's ways to do that, which are equitable and fair. You're not just giving it away, but maybe it's a rent-to-own plan. Maybe it's some other thing. You know, land trust could help with that. So other questions? I know you had, yep.
Yeah, what's your thoughts on farmland preservation programs if the credit per acre were much larger? One of the that seems to help keep people on the land,
Mm-hmm.
and also what's a real advantage of it is that it requires compliance with conservation practices.
Right. Yep.
And R151.
Yep. So the questions about farmland preservation credits to keep people on the land more, help farmers out. So yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And one of the challenges we're having right now is a lot of those programs exist now. Like at the federal level, there's the Environmental Conservation Reserve Program, CRP. So you can like get money from the federal government for basically not plowing right up to the stream and causing all this erosion, take that erodible land out of production. My parents have gotten money doing this, okay? Basically preserve the habitat, save the land that way, and the government will help you get money for that. So we have all those types of programs, which are great. And you know what's really nice about those programs too, is you get direct money. Okay, so this is one thing which I get one of my pet peeves with everything the government does now is that you don't get any direct payments anymore. It goes through some bank intermediary that's skimming off 10, 20%. That's what all the crop insurance is like that. All these other programs are like that. Like you're just basically feeding this corporate structure. Just give me a check. Give me directly a check. Right? So that's what's nice about those programs. It's like you are getting the money directly. It's not going through an intermediary. One of the problems now is they're trying to propose this whole carbon credit market. So people have probably heard about farmers signing up to get carbon credits for conservation practices. That goes through a privatized marketplace, which is controlled by giant corporations. And they will take 10, 15, 20% off the top. Okay, and we can talk more about, well, personally as an economist, I think the idea of trading pollution is a horrible idea. Pollution is a bad thing. We should not make it a good thing that people buy and sell. Because you can see the next thing we're going to be buying and selling all sorts of other bad things as commodities, which we shouldn't be doing. Pollution just should be not happening. But so that's like a lot of farmers, they want to wipe out the Conservation Reserve Program and push everybody into carbon credits. And I think that's a horrible idea. If we want to protect the climate, it should be done through conservation programs that already exist where farmers get direct payments for that. You know, whether it's protecting pollinator habitat, you know, reducing erosion, all that type of stuff. So, yeah, those programs need to be expanded, I would argue. Yeah.
A follow-up question, I should know this, but with FPP, if, say, a producer has a farm under their own ownership, say 200 acres, but if they rent another 150 acres,
Mhm.
are those credits available for the land they rent because it's part of their operation?
That's a good question. I don't know.
should know it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. So, but I mean, and just to be aware, a lot of these programs are also dependent upon like base acreage type stuff. So, like my farm is eligible for a whole bunch of credits based on like stuff that was grown 20 years ago, long before we were even there. Like this was supposedly a cornfield way back when or something. That like gives us some option to get more subsidies, but like, we're never going to be growing corn again, right? We're growing vegetables now. So, but that's like part of a lot of these programs. Unfortunately, sort of privilege certain types of crop production. So, I would argue that someone growing monocultures of corn and soybeans using glyphosate should not be getting carbon credits. that they should not be getting government subsidies for that. Okay, people know that Monsanto just paid out $7 billion to try to sell a bunch of lawsuits for all the people getting non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from the glyphosate exposure. Okay, we should not be promoting more toxic chemical use or more that type of stuff if we really care about conservation. So, yep. Oh, yeah, we're going to wrap up here. So, well, thank you all so much for participating. It was a really good conversation. And feel free to help yourself to information back there. And I'm so glad so many people came out for a Monday night in Prairie du Sac. So thanks for coming.